Hello, and welcome to Midst Messages. We are Third Person. I'm Zen.
I'm Sarah Weil.
And I am Matt Rowan. And together we are Third Person, the hosts of the science fiction podcast Midst, as well as Moonward and Unend. And today we have a very special episode of a show we call Midst Messages to share with you.
And if you've never heard of Midst Messages before, well, that's because it's our monthly behind-the-scenes podcast, usually only available to our subscribers on midst.co and beacon.tv, in which we answer questions submitted by our subscribers.
But today we're doing something a little bit different. This is an extra special public episode of Midst Messages, and we wanted to share it with everyone because today we are taking a deep dive into Midst's 3 comics published by Dark Horse.
And this time, we're the ones who get to ask the questions. And we'll be hearing from a bunch of talented people who worked on the comics, including some living, breathing guests who we're so excited to chat with on air about the comic making process. We'll have with us later in the episode Will Kirkby, who did the cover art for all 3 of the comics, Aviv Or, the artist for The Valorous Farmer, and Kendra Wells, the writer of Ripples.
If you enjoy this episode and would like to hear some more of Midst Messages and get early ad-free access to episodes of Unend, our soon-to-be releasing season, you can become a subscriber at midst.co or beacon.tv.
But today we are not talking about Unend, we are talking about comics.
Comics! So there's Midst Comics now. That's quite the mental adjustment for us.
It's exciting.
It's crazy.
It's literally bananas.
Not even just one of them, not even just 2 of them, there's 3 of them.
First up, there is Address Unknown, a comic about the origins of Midst itself, as well as a little story about the Shearwater siblings,
who you may know under different names, at least one of them, the Postmaster from Midst fame. And if you're keeping up with Unend, there's also a certain Everett Shearwater.
Address Unknown is written by Colin Lorimer, art by Alejandro Aragon, with colors by Chris O'Halloran.
The second comic is titled The Valorous Farmer, which is a story exploring a slightly different side of the strange and interesting organization known as the Trust. We meet the farmer Hildebrand and explore a story about agriculture and community. This story was written by Jasmine Walls, art by Aviv Or, and the colorist was Quentin Winter.
And the third comic to be released is titled Ripples. This is a story that takes place in the Deep Fold, where tradition comes head-to-head with curiosity when a shard of Midst's fallen moon comes into contact with a very isolated Fold community. And we get to meet a young boy named Daggle, who gets swept up in wondering about where it came from and what it might mean for his understanding of the cosmos. This is set in the very near future of the cosmos relative to the original podcast, Midst.
Written by Kendra Wells, with art by Vash Taylor and colors by Valentina Bianconi.
Additionally, all 3 of these comics, as mentioned earlier, have cover art by the incredible Will Kirkby, and the lettering was done by Jim Campbell. So, how did we settle on these 3 particular stories? We had an incredible opportunity to work with Dark Horse here, and not really very many parameters foisted upon us. They basically asked, what are you interested in telling a story about?
Yeah, it was kind of an open invitation. What comics do you want to make? And we had to give it some thought.
Yeah. And of course, very, very tempting. The first step was to panic. This was a reoccurring theme, which we'll talk about more. But eventually, we decided to focus on never-before-seen characters.
Or rarely seen characters.
Rarely seen characters. Because being new to comics ourselves, we wanted to allow the experienced writers and artists a bit more control and ownership over the stories. So as tempting as it might be to go into something like prequels right away, that would require way more oversight.
Yeah, a lot more management
from us.
Yeah, for sure. With like pre-existing characters like Lark and Weep and Phineas, the protagonists of Midst, we knew that we would have to do a lot of like micromanaging, a lot of fact checking and lore oversight, like you were saying, to kind of keep those elements in line with the stories that we've already told. And because comics are such a collaborative effort, this was such a awesome opportunity to be able to like open up the Midst cosmos and have these new voices and new perspectives help enrich that world and that experience. So,
and while that kind of thing might be on the table in the future, it's not where we wanted to start for our first foray into the ocean of comics, the fold of comics, you might even say.
Yeah, so we wanted to branch out and explore our cosmos in new ways with some new characters, some new people, some new places.
As mentioned, comic books by their very nature are incredibly complicated and collaborative experiences. And throughout this episode, we're going to be discovering kind of, I think, a theme of how it is really a kind of alchemy, the way that we work together, the way that stories can be amplified and enriched by having others participate in telling the tale. And I personally wanted to take this opportunity to share one small way that I am so thankful, not only to you, Sarah and Zen, but also everyone, all of the names mentioned so far who have contributed to and worked on these comics. I'm so thankful to every single member of the team that touched these stories. And because you have been involved in this now, you have become part of this cosmos. And in that way, you've kind of become a part of a story of mine, too, that I wanted to share. When I was about 6 years old or so, my parents had the opportunity to take me and my not quite 1-year-old sister to Mexico. This was massive. This is a whole country away. Further than grandma's house, a whole nother language. This was a lot for a young person to wrap their head around. My father worked for the Department of Natural Resources at the time and hailed from a long line of caretakers for public lands. And from time to time would don the guise, or the outfit, the costume, literally, of Smokey Bear.
What?
At
Hang on.
community gatherings.
I don't think I knew that. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, my dad was sometimes Smokey Bear.
Wow.
Smokey, for those who may not be familiar, is a character who was developed by the U.S. Forest Service to teach about the dangers of human-caused wildfires, which even today is a leading cause of just tremendous and devastating damage that humans struggle with the world over. But I was talking about this trip to Mexico, and in preparation for this trip, and because of my dad's connection to the sort of icon of Smokey Bear, we had access to and were able to bring with us a collection of comic books that had been produced that were sort of telling the story of Smokey. I remember the first time that I got to see this comic in the flesh for the first time, just going page to page and getting to compare both the English and the Spanish language versions that we were able to bring, and to see how this story, like from page to page, as I myself was learning the ability to read symbolic language and to see that here between these versions, like so clearly because of the identical pictures and panels, there were two different sets of symbols, both stating the same thing but slightly differently. It blew my mind. It fundamentally represented this way to communicate things like the values of empathy and care to other people, using symbols that like were sort of different in between these issues, like the language of the lettering, but most crucially, the symbols that were the same, like the pictures, the color, and the story of Smokey Bear, to find common ground.
So what was it about?
Oh, that's a great question, Sarah. The comic book itself was very, very sweet. It was kind of this almost like Bambi-esque tale about a real, actual wildfire disaster that affected an actual baby bear who did survive, but was badly burned by it. He was adopted by the Forest Service that was taking care of that particular fire, lived a very long and rich life, was actually named Smokey after the icon Smokey Bear. And when in the story of the comic book, like this, this bear, this is where it starts to get a little fictionalized. The bear, upon discovering that the fire that was responsible for destroying his habitat was caused by humans, he does a very noble thing and doesn't seek vengeance. He instead goes out on a kind of journey of education and trying to inform others about how terrible, I agree, how terrible wildfires could be. Remember, only you can prevent wildfires. So from an early age, I was sort of beginning to appreciate and adore the power of a good comic book. It is this exercise in collaborative storytelling where artists, writers, letterers, and storytellers all have to align their intentions to work together to communicate. And though some of those elements may vary, there are decisions that are made at every turn that like belie intent and thoughtfulness and consideration. So a bit of a sad real life note. My father passed away this winter very suddenly and unexpectedly, just a few days before our birthdays and the turning of the year. And in my last conversation with him, I was able to express how that first comic book, that Smokey Bear comic book, was such a profound and meaningful opportunity for me to learn about how to communicate, and how that set me really on this path that somehow led to be able to learn and communicate with others to create these comic books. So I just wanted to say that I am so glad and grateful and thankful to have had this opportunity to work with such talented people and to be able to create a story that does help communicate, I think, ultimately these values of care and empathy for others, and that I got to share that with my dad before he passed. Just, it means the world to me. There is never a good time to go, but by becoming a part of a story that's a little bit greater than what we might individually be able to accomplish, I think we've succeeded in being able to tell some tales that do get into some really fabulous world building within the Midst cosmos, but ultimately this experience of getting to share that and to work together and to see the magical way in which that collaboration results in a cool story. I don't know. It was just really special for me, and I want to thank you all for being on that journey with me. So that's my little piece.
Thank you, Matt. What a journey it has been.
Yeah. Well, Smokey the Bear may not appear in person in any of the three Mids comics, but I think his influence can be found if you look closely.
His beneficent spirit is there. Always, ever watchful. I think Smokey, in his famous words, only you can create comic books. With the power of friendship and collaboration, anything is possible. And speaking of collaboration, let's hear now from some of the artists and writers behind these comics. First, we have a little Q&A with some long-distance guests to whom we sent long-distance questions and from whom we received long-distance answers. First up, we'll be hearing from Colin Lorimer, the writer of Address Unknown.
And here's the question we sent to Colin. In Address Unknown, Ogden and Rowan meet a group of settlers from the fold, including the Nelson family, their bodyguard Merv, and their babysitter Howie. We didn't give you much direction for these characters. They were largely your creation, and they're all so distinctive, especially Howie, cook/dancer/babysitter extraordinaire. We love Howie. What inspired these memorable characters?
And here's what Colin had to say.
I'm just looking back at my original character ideas. I'll be honest, Merv Peake, the bodyguard, was named after the writer Mervyn Peake. just happened to have a biography of his on my desk and thought Merv was a pretty good name for a bodyguard. My notes read, Merv Peak, security and a work-for-hire bodyguard to the Mercers. A bit of a badass, suited and booted. Imagine Marv from Sin City if played by Michael Shannon. I should say that we originally had the family's name as Mercer and later changed it to Nelson. And I thought it would be a good idea if the Dennisons of the Fold was mainly a family. A mother, a father, a couple of kids. That way a strong emotional bond was already locked in. I then added to that their personal bodyguard and nanny just to make up the numbers. Meredith Nelson, I described her as a young Shelley Winters. Sam Nelson, Kurt Russell around the time of The Thing. And make sure you include the beard. Always have the beard. You always have to have the beard. And then, of course, there's Howie. My description of Howie was Howie Flakes 22. I can't recall how I came up with that name, to be quite honest. Maybe I was eating cornflakes at the time. I really can't remember. A cook, dancer, and babysitter to the Mercers, to the Nelsons. Meredith just loves them's energy, looks and dresses like a young Noel Fielding of the Mighty Bush. Reading this back, he may look like Noel Fielding, being a little androgynous in style, but his personality was inspired by the likes of Graham Norton, the Irish chat show host, high energy, funny, and maybe crossed with a little bit of Courtney Act. I'd love to see more of Howie in Midst. There's certainly a lot more to tell. Third Person have created some incredibly unique characters, so you really have to up your game to compete. And I'm just glad I got to play in their sandpit. Thanks so much.
Oh, that's so nice.
Address unknown. Noel Fielding. Yes.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that occasionally draws character inspiration from various actors and celebrities and that sort of thing.
Yeah, such characterful individuals.
Yeah.
And Colin's comment about the original family name having been Mercer, that I think for obvious reasons.
We didn't want anyone to think that we were making a intentional reference to some
certain other
famous Mercers that may be adjacent to the Midst brand.
Incredible work by Colin, writer of Address Unknown. Such a fun story from him, tying in all this great past and present history of the islet of Midst and the town of Stationary Hill. Colin Lorimer, writer of Address Unknown.
But of course, the script is only one part of the equation. We also had amazing art from Alejandro Aragon, and oh my gosh, his art was we just loved it instantly. It was such a good fit for this story.
Yeah, it fit the sort of Wild West space vibe of Midst so well.
It has such a cool energy to it, like a looseness, but also a precision at the same time.
It is very, very cool. Alejandro also joins us long distance with a pre-recorded response to our question, which we sent to him. Alejandro, you created so many unique monsters and creatures for Address Unknown. The terror-transformed flashlight critter, the needleback, the terror-transformed needleback, this guy Bike Boy.
Bike Boy!
Everybody loves Bike Boy. Bike Boy forever. And you even created the regular pack animals just seen around Stationary Hill. But Alejandro, the original terror-transformed needleback you designed was so insanely terrifying.
So scary.
That
so spooky.
We actually had to ask you to revise it to help ensure that there was eventually sort of an overall optimistic tone rather than just pure full-ass terror.
Right, because the outcome of this story is that people decide that it's okay to continue living on Midst. And this creature was so scary, you guys, that
it was insane.
It would not be okay.
No, everyone would leave.
That was out
People
there.
would move away. No one would ever live on Midst ever again if they knew this creature was there.
It was very cool, and we regretted having to ask it to be reined back in. But
so we asked Alejandro where he gets his inspiration for fantasy animals and monsters from, and Alejandro had this to say.
Hey guys, I could mention Carpenter, the Dark Souls universe, Berserk, Japanese horror movies, manga, whatever, but the truth is that I'm not really sure. Because when I have to create something, I try not to think about anything. I mean, I don't want to contaminate whatever it is that needs to come out. And when I was a teenager, I had a rock band. I played the bass and I had to study jazz. Jazz relies heavily on improvisation, which to me means being fully present in the moment with no time for control. And that is where life's most meaningful moment happened to me. So when I started drawing comics, I never forgot that. I couldn't forget that. So no matter how much effort I put into my preliminary designs, I always make the final decision in front of the blank page. And I like to think that even if it doesn't work, everything is gonna be okay, because everything can be fixed. So lack of control for something honest and alive, that is one of the biggest lessons art has taught me, and I applied to life in general too.
Damn, that's so cool.
He uses principles of jazz improvisation to create monsters. Most based response imaginable.
Well, maybe that's why his art was such a good fit, you know, semi-improv narration, semi-improv art.
Incredible.
Also, just have to shout back to the colorist, Chris O'Halloran, who like really made the art pop, especially with the contrast between the unscenes and the fold scenes. It just all comes together in such a nice way.
Yeah. Incredible. We've talked a lot about how Mid's semi-improvised nature brings this kind of organic slipperiness where it just sort of the element of surprise, the unexpected, the liveliness, and to have Alejandro confirm that that's a big part of how he creates his worlds visually. Just, yeah, Address Unknown has such an organic look.
Yeah.
It's got a very loose, very jazz-like visual style. I love that. Alejandro Aragon, artist of Address Unknown.
And lastly, we were able to send a question long distance to Jasmine Walls, who was the writer behind The Valorous Farmer. And this was the question that we had for Jasmine. You created such likable and grounded characters and brought an incredible authenticity to Hildebrand's plight and the specific details of their farming life. What aspects of the story did you feel the most excited to explore and the most connected to in telling this story? And here's what Jasmine had to say. Thank you. When I was given the outline for Hildebrand's story, I knew I was going to have a great time building on it. I briefly studied agriculture in school after getting my culinary degree because food justice and sustainable foodways are something I feel very passionate about. So getting the chance to write a character dealing with these exact struggles was like a little gift just for me. I love writing really character-driven stories, and Hildebrand's was exactly the kind of challenge I enjoy. I wanted to balance this weird, terrifying, amazing world with keeping the reader grounded enough for it to feel like this really could be someone's life. Hildebrand faces problems that any of us do, second-guessing themselves, wondering if they're really cut out for the career that they've chosen, but also so determined to try and make it work anyway. It's so easy to get caught up in our problems that we forget the community building is an essential part of humanity. We were never meant to carry every burden alone. Also, how cool is it that I got to help create a brand new creature? Heartfelt character arcs aside, the unraveling scene was just fun as hell to write. Thank you, Jasmine.
Yes, thank you. I remember we got to have a call with Jasmine just at the very beginning of the comic writing process and had no idea of the whole, that Jasmine had studied agriculture in school, and it was just such a perfect little tie-in, and I think you can see the depth that it adds to the story.
Yeah, amazing synchronicity. Similar almost to Alejandro's interest in improvisation, to have a writer who is literally into the practice and history of sustainable agriculture as the writer for this comic was amazing serendipity.
Yeah, it's alchemy, like you were saying, Matt.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, before we move on to our conversation with our guests, I did want to shout out one more person who had a big influence on all these comics, and that is Jenny Bingham Blank, editor at Dark Horse. We've never, as mentioned, we've never been in comics before, so of course we've never worked with a comic editor, and Jenny was such a good editor. We were consistently amazed by her eye for detail, the way she would accurately call out lore inconsistencies, sometimes before we would even notice them. It really felt like there was a fourth person who had our back throughout the whole process. So just want to give credit where credit is due. The creation of a successful comic comes from so many people working, not just those who end up with their names on the front cover. So thank you, Jenny, and the whole team at Dark Horse.
Hear, hear.
And now it's time to meet a few more members of that broader team live on the air with us today. We are joined by cover artist of the entire series of Mids Comics, all 3 comics plus the collected edition cover art by Will Kirkby. Hello, Will.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here and to get to chat to you all.
It's a pleasure to have you. Artist for the comic The Valorous Farmer, Aviv Or.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on.
You are most welcome. We're thrilled to have you. And the writer of Ripples, Kendra Wells. Hello, Kendra.
Hi.
We're so excited to have all 3 of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me and us.
So let's have a few brief introductions from our team before we get into our conversation today. Will, tell us a little bit about yourself and some of your work.
I've done a fair bit of illustration work for Critical Role and for you guys doing the episode illustrations. I've been drawing for, incredibly long time, but been freelance for about, 10, 15 years, I think now.
Wow.
Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most recent piece of work that people have seen out there is I did the illustration and design work for a game called Eat the Reich.
Yes. Oh, I saw that on social media. It looks awesome.
Yeah. You get to play vampires murdering as many possible Nazis as possible in World War II.
Fabulous.
Very anti-fash, punk, kind of slaughter fest of a game.
That's awesome.
Produced with the amazing game designer Grant Howitt, who did Honey Heist, which is one that everyone seems to know, as well as Spire and Heart. Phenomenal to work with that kind of talent.
Oh, incredible.
Exquisite.
Fantastic. That's true. And we'll cover this more as well. But Will is also the creator of numerous incredible artworks for the lightly animated series. The original Midst episodes appearing on YouTube feature many incredible illustrations by Will, in addition to his great work on these comics. Aviv, thanks for being here with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and some of your past and present work.
So I also have been drawing for way longer than memory exists. And I've been freelancing as an illustrator for the past few years. And I've only gotten into like the comics industry in the past 2 years, I think.
No
with like
way.
my first book. Yeah.
I had no idea. You're so good at it.
Thank you. I have been drawing comics since I was 13, but it was mainly like self-published. And like my biggest project so far is Crystal Heart. It's a webcomic about role-playing games that I do with my creative partner, Eran Aviram. But yeah, like getting actually into the industry was the past 2 years, and Midst was actually the second industry comics that I've ever done.
Oh my
so
gosh.
that was a
We
very
are so
exciting
lucky to have
project.
you.
Yeah, we lucked out.
Yeah, an honor.
Talk about jumping into the deep end, too.
Yeah, truly.
Oh my goodness, yes. And what about you, Kendra? What about some of your recent past or present works?
I've been doing comics and illustration for my entire career, I guess. And I've recently started to get into writing comics as well. And funnily enough, Midst was also my second book that I wrote that I wasn't also the artist of.
It
We
was
didn't
so
plan
good.
this
Oh, thank
coincidence.
you.
Oh my gosh, spectacular. Well, let's chat about these comics. It's what brings us all together today. We are so lucky to have you all on this strange and mystic journey with us. We're also new to comics.
Yeah, this is our
This is
first.
our first time
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
this. If you had told us years ago that Mids would become comics, we would just have probably laughed. And then
and asked you how you learned time travel. But
Yes.
that's another
No.
conversation.
It's absolute nonsense to us that this has even come to pass. So we'd like to chat with all of you. This is just an open question for everyone before we share a few individual questions with each of you directly. We wanted to talk to you about what it's like, what it has been like for you in general to work on these, but also generally, what is it like for you to be hired to work on a comic IP that you are not necessarily already, an expert in or previously familiar with? What's your process when you're brought on to jump into a new universe of storytelling, such as MIDS, for example? How does that tend to work for you?
Like, I imagine that is the case for most people working on comics most of the time, with maybe the exception of huge IPs like Batman or something that everyone just kind of has ambient knowledge about.
Yeah, you can't really become an expert on all lore before you start working on a new project like this. That can't be feasible. So how do you approach something like this, and where do you focus your efforts? We'll open the floor to anyone who'd like to jump in.
You guys made it very easy. The simple of it was jump on, listen to as much of the podcast as I could in like an afternoon to get an idea of just the vibes and the ideas that were floating around. And it's so kind of immersive with the sounds that it just kind of immediately gets the imagination engaged. I mean, for me, I was lucky because I worked on the animated episode elements.
Right. So you have a bit of an advantage in that respect because you've been swimming in the midst waters for a while now.
And I got to see some of the other artists who worked on those while I was trying to come up with things, which was kind of intimidating but challenging because you look at their work and I'm immediately thinking, I've got to be at that level. I've got to be doing crazy things like...
Well, I'm certain you inspire exactly the same feelings in other artists.
Can confirm.
There's a friend of mine, Ricardo Besser, who works on...
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
their work is just...
That's awesome.
It's stunning. Like their work is so kind of amazing and ethereal
and
and
coloring,
light.
It's so luminous.
Yeah. So for me, it was getting inspiration from listening to you, but also seeing how that influenced other creatives, and I don't know, kind of blossomed inspiration for me, which is kind of my route into then exploring how I wanted to see the world that you'd created.
Yeah. Well, your vision of the Mids Cosmos has influenced us in turn. I mean, you have such a intuitive grasp of the kind of funkiness that we're trying to get at.
Yeah. You've all brought the cosmos to life in incredible ways. Aviv or Kendra, how do you approach jumping into a new universe like this?
I mean, I listened to a decent amount of Midst before I was hired on this project, which was very, very cool for me. But it did help that you guys have I think you sent like a thick document of like notes and glossary stuff, and that was very, very helpful, especially from a writing perspective, to be able to like go back and check my notes and be like, okay, like, is this at all canon? But it also was interesting too, because at least the ripples that I was working on, it's within the Midst universe, but it's a completely unique story. So I was able to sort of start from scratch, which was really exciting for me. And I was very appreciative to be allowed to just wing it and kind of like follow the little like threads of interest that I had, and being encouraged to explore and to have fun and to really jump in with both feet without worrying too much about like, oh, is this like precisely accurate? Is this precisely like within the world's rules and things? The world of Midst is so chaotic and interesting and sort of freeform that it helped to be able to just be like, okay, like what can I, like what are the outer limits of what I can do?
Particularly because you were telling a story set in the fold, which is even more prone to entropy than any other part of the cosmos.
Going off from what Will said, first of all, I only listened to a few, maybe half the first season, I think, but just the vibes that you give, like there was just enough information and vibe to make me like, yeah, I understand this world, no problem. But then also, in addition to that, basically the Bible you sent with all the information about what midst is, what the un is, what the fold is. There was also all these the handouts, like the graphic stuff that I think Sarah, you're in charge of, if I heard correctly.
At some point, if you trace it back to its origins, maybe, but a lot of these resources are things that, the team at Critical Role has helped to compile in order to send out to, partners like you. So I'm not exactly sure what all you were sent, but I'm glad it helped.
Yeah.
That's fair. But yeah, that like those things are such a beautiful combination of actual information and vibe together in one little piece of graphic and art. And it was really, really helpful in understanding what is this world that I'm working in. And even if the story that I was working on did not involve maybe like, I don't know, high valor fashion, for example, just knowing that this exists in the world informs my understanding of it and therefore the artwork that comes out of it.
Well, you did such a great job. You really sold a place that could never exist in real life and made it feel real, but we'll get into that more later.
Mm-hmm. One final follow-up for all of you collectively. I'm curious to hear from each of you if there's anything in particular about acclimating to this midst cosmos that was particularly surprising or challenging for you or difficult for you to wrap your head around either in writing or in art. What comes to mind for you, if anything?
Well, in the fold, everything is dark. So I was like, how, like, where do I start describing things that exist in a world that is literally like zero light? How does a world develop in that exist? Like, how do everyday people exist in the fold was like the real root of Ripples. And it required a lot of like, just starting with something basic, like here's a kid who's on a farm, he's getting milk. What does that mean in this universe? And it turns out it means giant bug milk.
So good.
But it was interesting to have to kind of on one hand I was jumping in with both feet and I was really excited to like take it as far as I could, but on the other hand, there was this like the anchor part of my brain being like, how the hell does any of this work?
That is so fair.
Yes, absolutely.
But it was really exciting.
We're familiar with.
Yeah. It's fun to kind of unlearn the things that you take for granted in story building and storytelling and world building and stuff.
It's funny that Kendra mentions that it's dark in the fold because in the it's just light everywhere.
You had the opposite problem.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I had to retrain myself to like, I'm used to putting shadows under things.
Oh
yes.
My gosh.
But they don't necessarily have a shadow when you have light all around and there's a small little tractor spaceship on an islet that's made of a bright mica material. Where are the shadows going? So that was an adventure all in its own.
Aviv, you are touching on something that I have been struggling with as long as we have started like contracting outside artists to work on Midst, going back to all the illustrations for the animated YouTube versions. I wrote all the art briefs for that, and I can't count the number of times I had to write some version of like, so the sky is like a flat white color. Sorry, there's no singular light source.
There's no directional light.
It's actually kind of. You could spin it in a way where that's actually quite boring, but I want you to draw it in a way that's not boring. So just do that, please.
Yeah, it's a tall order for any artist working on mids to explain that like all of your normal comprehension of how light works in illustration, forget it.
Yeah, sorry, you can't have any light sources.
No, but we would also like it to look cool. And obviously light is what makes things look cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, tricky.
I was really happy to pass some of that problem to the colorist, who did such a beautiful job. Yes.
Quentin Winter. It's amazing being new to comics. Like we said, it was so cool to see how much influence the colorist has over the final look of the product and how much life that they breathe into the line art. So yes,
100%.
Excellent coloring by Quentin Winter on The Valorous Farmer.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Will? Anything else that's coming to mind for you with respect to unique challenges in illustrating these comic covers or just work for MIDS in general?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a huge element, which I think Kendra was touching on, is there's this wonderful vein of absurdism and surrealism in the environments and the way things can be warped and changed in a moment's kind of exultation and craziness. I just loved that a big chunk of what I had to do was take what was massive and try and distill it into a human perspective. So picking things that took the extreme and rooted it in a lived experience within single illustrations, because like when you're doing the narrative illustration that's sequential on a comics page, it gives you the freedom to not have to explain everything in a single moment. You can allow it to come across naturally. When it's a single illustration, you have to almost give the information of an entire scene in a single shot, which can be incredibly hard. So trying to find the mundanity of like the cover of the Valorous Farmer, having the gloves and something that felt tactile, the dirt, the ground, but still having like the razor clams scattered on the floor.
Well said. Yes.
Having like the hints of horror in the reflection of the broken kind of wing mirror.
Yeah.
It's like trying to take weird things and distill them down into something that people could imagine experiencing.
Yeah, so well said.
Yeah. Something, what I'm kind of hearing as a thread throughout the remarks that all three of you have made are kind of that tension between how do you make the familiar strange, and in what way do you kind of like press those against each other? How do you pull them apart? And how do you invite the reader, in the case of a comic book, to enter this strange and unusual space, but to have that kind of grounding element, these tactile details, these things that bring you into that space so that from there, whatever is about to transpire, whatever strange creatures, whatever weird environments you're going to encounter, you're kind of there with the characters then. And you all in your own fabulous ways made it so accessible that way. I just wanted to remark on that. I love it dearly. So thank you.
Yeah, we're geeking out, you guys.
Yes.
We're all huge fans.
Big fans.
Not to get too in the weeds about like comic theory and stuff, but
no, please
do it.
Go into those.
This is the time.
Yes, we are there. The weeds have grown.
Nerd out.
Okay. Well, if you insist, twist my arm.
I do.
It's fun because, I mean, having been on both the writing and art side of doing comics, it's sort of a unique medium that I really love because unlike a movie where each frame has to happen, start to finish, to tell the story the way it does, comics sort of do time travel. They sort of do, the way that you read comics affects the way that time passes in the comic. Based on the composition, based on the way that space is used, and negative space and speech bubbles and things. Like you can control the way the reader experiences time and experiences stories, like within the comic itself. So I don't know. I feel like comics is sort of uniquely suited for something like a radio play, like something like Midst, where it's not relying on visuals making sense chronologically. Like you can kind of play within the space and manipulate time and manipulate, because in one panel to another, you could have, in panel 1, a man is standing there. In panel 2, there's a giant bug. And it's like having that experience to be like, okay, how do we connect these two things? And you can have them exist simultaneously in a way that you can't really in other visual art, creation.
And sometimes that connection occurs in the reader's mind.
Yeah.
You can really play and manipulate and make things very abstract in a way that you can't really with just prose or just art or just visual.
specifically about ripples, which I read last night. There's so many pages there that are double spreads, that you like. The whole background is the magicality of the fold, and on top of that, things are happening. And I don't know if that was in the script, like your work, Kendra, or if that was the artist, or a combination of both. But that is, I think, like the thing that you can only do in comics is have that fold exist on the page, and the event is happening within that, and on top of that, and outside of that. And that was really cool to see.
I mean, yeah, the artist Vash Taylor did a truly incredible, because I not to step on your toes, going into this from a visual arts perspective, knowing that I had to pass the script off to an artist who wasn't in my own head was a challenge. But Vash did such an incredible job translating it all, and I feel very, very lucky that it.
Yes.
that we were able to make what we made.
I think that you and Vash were a great duo for this particular story because, Vash's layouts are so dreamy and surreal and like really break convention in many cases. I'll just roll straight into the question that we had specifically for you, Kendra, because we've already kind of started talking about it. You are an artist as well as a writer, and it sounds like you, like the bulk of your experience has been in illustration, and writing is somewhat more recent for you. So one thing I noticed when Ripples was only at the script stage, and that's all we had, your script writing style is so vivid and descriptive. It's almost more like reading a novel. You know, some people write scripts more like screenplays where it's just very spare, like the positions of the characters, what they say, just enough information to give the artist what they need. But you give more. And it really set the tone we were hoping for. And I just wanted to invite you to talk a little bit about your script writing process in general and for Ripples in particular.
Well, thank you so much. That's so kind. I think it helped to, when I'm writing my own scripts for my own work, I tend to be a lot more sparse and be a lot more loosey-goosey with it, because I know that when I go back to the script, I know, like, I have the visual in my head. I know what I'm going for. So the script is more for my editor. It's more for, like, here's the structure of the book itself. And beyond that, I will fill in the blanks. But when I was working on Ripples, it was my second time writing a graphic novel script, the first one being the Mighty Nine Origins Caduceus Clay, which I also had a delightful time with. And I was finding myself having these very specific images in my head. And there's sort of, I find there's sort of a tension when you're a visual artist and you're trying to communicate to another visual artist, because you have to at some point let it go and be like, I need to trust this other artist's vision. Like, I don't want to step on their toes. I don't want to prevent them from doing their own thing. But also, when you have these certain, it's like, I want to have it be getting across what I have in my head. So there is sort of this push and pull with figuring it out. But with a lot of it, it was just trying to get on paper, like, this is the vibe I'm going for. This is the style of visual that I'm aiming towards. And for Ripples, it was very much like The Witch by Robert Eggers.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely.
Yes.
That, but like at the bottom of the ocean with a bunch of like photosynthetic, bioluminescent plants and animals and things. And I don't know, it's a challenge for me to know when to pull back. And I think I'm still learning that, like how far to go. And there's so much excitement that comes with seeing what, like what Vash came up with and like how close it was to what I had in my head, and then appreciating that for the way that it exists. And it's a challenge. It's very fun. It's a completely different mental exercise than the way that I work when I'm working strictly in art or like strictly from my own head.
Yeah. If it's all right, could I share just one tiny excerpt from your script
Yes.
and we can
Yes,
sort
of
of talk
course.
about like how that translated into the art. So this is when Daggle first discovers the crater with the piece of mica that has crash landed on his home islet. Panel 1. In the center of a deep, still smoking pit, there is a shard of something. Shimmering white, blue, silver, bright as a coal and the size of a cow skull. In the light surrounding it, we can see the air crumpling, jagged bolts of black and purple sparks crackling into the sky. Like, ugh, it's so good. Juicy.
Air crumpling. That's so good.
Such a vivid choice of words to describe to an artist in terms of how it is the size of a cow. There are a lot of things that are that size, but that you selected specifically a cow
It's perfect.
skull.
Like it
brings an eeriness
your
to the
word
vibe.
choices are so vibey, and I think if you go to that page and I just love to compare the script with like what actually ended up in the final product, and I think that mood really translates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with that specifically, I was trying to like with the cow skull because I was like, well, what does Daggle think this is? You know, like what is a child, a 10-year-old or so, seeing something like this? Like, what is his frame of reference? You know, like I couldn't say, oh, it's about the size of a suitcase.
Yeah.
You know, he's never seen a suitcase before.
Yeah.
And I think that helps set maybe this is just the way that my brain works with visuals and writing. But it helps to like set that context and have that be the way that, you know, again, like kind of getting into the weeds with comic creation and like the sort of like meta construction of this, the way this stuff works. But, you know, if I said it's about the size of a suitcase, in the artist's head, they would be picturing a suitcase. Saying it's about the size of a cow skull, it's like, maybe like I don't know that I've ever actually seen a cow skull in person.
But you know what it's like.
Yeah.
But you get that feeling and like the sort of like inherent the vibe of it. You know, like it's like
The
it's more
freaky
jagged.
corpsiness.
It's more it's natural, but it's creepy. You know, there's something wrong.
Yes.
You know, and I think that getting sort of crossing that boundary, and that's part of why I love mids so much. Like I was just thinking of I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact episode, but when the storm comes and everything starts bending and twisting and people are experiencing entire lifetimes of torture and joy and explode, and people are exploding and turning into glass. And I loved that episode so much because it really encapsulates this feeling of like, what do your senses experience in life? What is the horror of that? Like when things are mismatched, when things don't go together, and how something very innocuous like that can kind of instill this dread because it's the lack of, not the lack of context, but the lack of reference, like reference points that you would usually have to make this feel normal in your head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Incredible answer. And your discussion of communicating these insane environments to an artist leads us in directly, I think, to our question for you, Aviv. We would like to ask you about taking that interpretation of a strange environment and bringing it to life through art. Matt, would you like to set Aviv up with our next question?
Sure. Yeah. So like we were kind of discussing the fold being this dark and strange, mysterious, entropic zone. Aviv, you were handed the challenging setting of the to investigate, this like floating crystal wilderness where everything and everyone has to protect themselves, shield themselves from the elements. You know, floating sheets of moss, space tractors, cities inside of hollow mica bergs. Apparently, this is no problem for you. But we're curious, is there anything you can't draw? Can you talk to us a little bit about your process when figuring out how to depict that unfamiliar, light-filled, razor mollusk infused setting?
Thank you, first of all. And I guess the first step in doing that is deep panic.
Me too. I'm so glad.
Yeah, really
that.
important part of the artistic process.
Absolutely. I'm glad we all share that.
We're all the same.
Yes, we cannot understate the amount of panic involved in all parts of all processes of all things.
Absolutely. Because one thing I can't draw, or at least coming into this, I said, this I can't do, is spaceships, is vehicles, is cities. A bunch of things that I've never really. I steered myself away from doing them for as long as I could. But the beautiful and challenging thing about comics is that you have to do what the script demands. So after Panic, I think the next step is well, you guys and Jenny as well, the editor, you all like provided so much reference, both visual and descriptive, and just gave me such a good space to understand what it is we're working with. I remember specifically for Gloria, the city within a big chunk of mica in just hanging in the un. You send me like a long list of just words, like a mood board without visuals, just words. And some of these things I've never really even encountered before. But like, for example, I think it was the first time that I've heard the term solar punk, which is apparently one of my favorite aesthetics now.
Oh, good.
Just Googling all of those things and getting like, putting everything in my head to understand, okay, this is what we are aiming for. And then I think the guiding principle for me was function, because when you're designing a city or someone's home or someone's farm in the middle of an endless space that is not really, you can breathe the air, but there are things that can kill you in the air. And like, there's a lot of things you have to contend with. So it's much easier to think about all these things and how, like, what does the thing need to be able to survive in this environment? Or thinking of the tractor, for example, it needs to be able to drive on mica and also fly in the un, and also do farmy things to moss sheets. That was like
protect its rider from
protect the rider,
sharp
exactly.
wind.
Have some stock, like space for stock in the back of the half pickup truck. So that was a whole afternoon of diving into a weird, learning everything I can about farming things and about moss and about tractors. I remember I sat in a cafe one day and I just took a quick photo of some sort of farming equipment or a motor vehicle that was going down the street. Like, I can use this.
Oh, that's so cool. And just to interject really quickly, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think this was another fantastic artist-writer pairing. Jasmine Walls was the writer for The Valorous Farmer and wrote such a, in this freaky, completely unrealistic setting, such a grounded, rooted story, and like really diving into intriguing tactile details about like, how does the farming work? What is the method that bread moss is harvested and dried, and then to see you translate that into the visual realm and these drying racks and like the harvesting tools. It was just so fascinating. You did a great job.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, but I agree. The script was so good, the writing was so good, the story, like we were talking about putting the surreal and the strange on the familiar, and I feel like in this story we absolutely brought out the familiar within the strange. The stories about communities, about a sweet poor farmer who just wants to get on with their day, has to deal with a bank and things like that.
Yep.
It's very relatable.
Normal farming problems.
All too real.
All so
Exactly.
real. Yeah. Oh, well, you did such a fabulous job of combining these like inscrutable tractors with the very human characters within it who are interacting with and interfacing with this whole environment. So
the way you do facial expressions, we all just fell in love with, well, Hildebrand, of course, but Naomi, like the instant she came on screen, we're like, I want one.
I love Naomi straight away from the script. She's so good.
Best neighbor.
I want this strong, no nonsense, like capable best friend to just come in and fix my tractor and tell me what I need to do and like take care of me. And
Yeah. Aviv, I want to touch on what you said a moment ago about generally feeling uncomfortable or unfamiliar with creating vehicles and cities. I mean, for a story that hinges around a vehicle, which is about going to a city, first of all, I want to congratulate you. I would never in a million years have presumed in any way that you were not an expert at those things. They look incredible. The tractor design is insane. It's so cool. We got our original concept art for it, and I fell over dead. That was it. It was great. It was so good. But I'm so curious about this because I find when people say I'm not good at drawing vehicles, what that means is I'm not good at drawing the way people normally would draw vehicles, or I'm not sure how I don't know how to draw a city the way a city should be. Well, nothing in MIDS is the way it should be. Everything is weird. And just as an analogy here, I create the music for the MIDS series, and one of my favorite ways to make music is to play an instrument that I have absolutely no idea how to play. Because there are no rules associated with it. I don't know what I'm doing. There's no right or wrong. There might be a right way, but I don't care because what comes out of playing an instrument that you are not familiar with is a completely unique and alien form of music that does not feel like it's from this world. So to come to creating a tractor or a city when you don't feel like you know how to do it the right way, I think brings to the comic a completely otherworldly interpretation of the concept of a vehicle or a city that is great for MIDS. And to hear that you brought this approach to the vehicles of coming to it as someone who normally doesn't think about vehicles and doesn't think about cities, I think that is an advantage. That is a gift that has allowed you to create some absolutely one-of-a-kind designs that were just outstanding for MIDS. So congratulations on not knowing how to do vehicles. It's terrific.
Thank you so
perfect.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's funny because my method is the complete opposite of just taking something I don't know and running with it. It's trying to study all the things that I possibly can get my hands on, references for cars and references for tractors and for spaceships, and just shove everything I can into my head and then pick up the things that serves the function of the thing that it needs. So if, our tractor needed a way to attach farming equipment that can also be removed. So I made sure that, you can do that where it doesn't bump into the tank-like wheels, because it can't have normal wheels because it needs to also fly. I don't remember by now the the thought process that led me to that tractor, but I'm very glad you were happy with it. After designing it, I remember I sent you a side view and a front view and very detailed and all my ideas. And then I thought, there is no way that I can draw this in a comic in a different angle. Are you
What
mad?
have I done?
Yes. So I actually went and studied. I learned how to use Blender for the first time. It's a 3D software.
So good.
Aviv.
Such a resource.
Amazing. Absolutely. I recommend every comic artist out there, just give it a go. And I'm happy to share some screenshots with you afterwards.
Oh, I'd love to see. I should really look into Blender myself. I struggle with just the word perspective kind of sends me running. Backgrounds in general, actually. I just like to draw people, and everything else I just feel like, the risk is too high. It's going to be clear that I don't know what I'm doing.
Same.
We just need people in a white void, and that's the story.
Yeah.
And we have the Un. The Un is a great start for a white void.
Yes.
We love that.
Yeah.
Just one more compliment for Aviv's art before we move on. So I just have to compliment your line art, because this is just my personal taste, and it's also the direction that I am pulled for my own art. I'm just such a sucker for crisp, calligraphic line art, exactly the way that you do. So I just drank in those, just the uncolored, completed inked artwork pages that you send. Do you do all your work digitally, or how do you do that?
So first of all, thank you so much. That's really, really kind. I work all digitally. I obviously, when I started drawing, it was pen on paper.
Yeah.
But now it's just so much easier on a computer, because I can just undo things and erase things and redraw them and use layers. Every digital software out there just gives you so many tools and to make it very, I know I don't need to tell it to the people here, but other, people might hear it's done on a computer and assume, oh, so the computer did all the work for you. Clearly, that's not the case.
We
But
know,
what
we
it
know
does
that's
give
not true.
is, yeah.
Yes,
What
I
it
wish my
does give
computer would do
is-
my work for me.
Well, in today's world,
Never mind.
Careful
That's
what
a-
you
that's-
say.
sorry, that's a
in
can of
the year of
worms.
our Lord
We will
2025.
go there.
well, what it does give is just a set of tools that make it easier, it means that I don't waste a lot of time correcting things or redrawing things and things like that. And it's, that's my favorite.
Incredible. Thank you very much, Aviv. And Will, these comics are
Clad.
they are clad.
They're clothed.
Yes, the art and writing that goes into the interior is spectacular and amazing, but the capstone on it all, the
first impression.
Yes, the
that
first
people
impression,
see.
of course, is the cover. Will is the artist of all 3 comic covers and also the artist of the cover for the collected edition, the hardcover of all 3 collected comics forthcoming. Will, tell us a little bit about your process for creating these comic covers for this mid-series. And if I'm understanding correctly, in many ways, often cover art is usually required before interior art is even complete. So how, without a complete comic to refer to, Will, how do you decide how to encapsulate an entire comic's worth of visual experience into a single cover? How does that work for you?
Well, with these comics, the covers in specific, I was given the scripts and just poured through those. Like at the moment, I've only read Kendra's scripts. I've not seen the actual book yet, so I don't know how the art's been translated. So hearing how you wanted to evoke these sense of scenes is pretty much my kind of routine. I experience the story, try to imagine every scene in a kind of fullness, to kind of almost feel like I'm there, so I can then pick like a moment I feel grabbed me the most or spoke to the story in general the most. Like, for example, their comic, there was this brilliant element of alienation and horror that runs through the beginning that, and I don't want to spoil too much, but translates into a sense of wonder and discovery and growth that's beautiful. And I wanted to try and touch on almost the tipping point between horror and wonderment. And I felt like that was a good kind of crystallized moment. Along with the script, I get, if I'm lucky, I'll have some early character sketches. So I got to see Aviv's brilliant kind of character sketches, some of the locket designs that you'd been noodling with, and various things that, and I have to be almost careful caretaker because having illustrated books myself, like the Yasha comic and the Not comic for Critical Role, I don't want to make choices for an artist that's doing way harder, way more work than me on this. I'm just trying to be this person who's hopefully giving the best foot forward for a book, without cutting off choices for who comes next to me in this kind of game of consequences. So, for example, I got to see some of the tractor designs early on, and I loved them, but I also realized, as an artist, that's something that could very much change between now and when they actually start working on the book. So I don't want to slap that on a cover and have the artist be locked into something they weren't 100% on.
Thank you.
Incredible. That's so thoughtful.
It's like I want to, like, it's almost like visiting a national park. You want to go in, you want to experience the wonder, maybe capture it, but you don't want to leave anything behind that spoils what's coming next.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, because when you're the sole creator on something, or you're, say, for example, doing the line art and the coloring, you can be that git that goes, that's a problem for the colorist to solve. That's a problem for the person next to. If it's yourself, as soon as it's not yourself, you want to be someone who's kind at passing on what's coming. You don't want to have soiled it for somebody else. It's like when Kendra was talking about the scripts. and how they wanted to give everything the artist would need to envision what you're envisioning, but at the same time not cut off their creativity, because if everyone's allowed to flourish, then the comic becomes more than the sum of its parts. You want it to be this additive process. So it's yeah, for me it was very much about picking something that I thought was glorious or interesting or terrifying, a key turning moment for the books, and just exploring that without shutting it off for anybody else coming after me.
And you are so fast, Will. You're like one of the fastest artists I think we've had the experience to work with in all this. And you come up with so many options. If I'm not mistaken, the collected edition will contain many of these sketches and character designs, as well as your variant cover ideas, so you can kind of see like what the spread of options were and what we ultimately settled on. Like for Ripples, I remember one of the options was this really cool, creepy, kind of gothic animal skull, like a cow skull. And I loved it. Like I kind of just want a print of that on my wall. But we ultimately thought that it made the comic seem darker than it really is. You mentioned it is a hopeful story, although it definitely has creepiness in it. It ends on an optimistic note.
Yeah. Again, it was a beautiful moment in Kendra's script where they're going to the church. It's almost like a turning point in choice that the main character has about running away from what they're perceiving as being a bad thing.
Yeah.
And there's just this moment of foreboding that was there that I was trying to encapsulate with the because it was almost a cattle skull with bioluminescent moss gathered out
So
the
cool.
eyes that had been attached to the church doors, and it felt like a very iconic moment. But looking at the choices, the two choices that I gave, I was secretly rooting for the sense of wonder. Because with all these options that I give, I think artists would like to say that there's no favorites in what I've shown you. That there always
there's
is
always
a
a favorite.
Always a favorite.
Oh yes,
The illusion of choice.
can
yes.
confirm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very lucky in that I would say 95% of the time I submit multiple options for a cover. People tend to go with the one that I'm most excited about.
Oh, nice.
Whether that's just that I seemingly put more mental effort into the ones I'm excited about.
Yeah, that's the secret trick. Just like
I'm
make it
stacking
look
the
better.
deck, but yeah, it just creates this wonderful kind of almost reinforcement when people come back and go, yes, and you feel, oh, I'm right, and it helps you get buoyed up for
Thank goodness.
producing a finalized piece.
Can I ask you about that? Do you ever send an option that you would not like to work on? Just like
No, there's a preference to what I would like to work on. Generally, if I'm sending something to someone, I'm happy with it.
okay.
I think the biggest kind of mental gymnastics I do is if somebody comes back and they want a different cover, like the example would be the Not the Goblin cover, for example. There were two options that I sent. One was the mask sunk to the bottom of a river. The other one is the cover that they used, which is it's almost flipped on its side, and it's half Veth, half not in the waterline, split with a kind of almost reflection kind of motif. Picking the one that I didn't think was going to be the choice, it kind of made me sit down and think, well, what did they see in it that I didn't? And it's trying to get inspired by what they found inspiring about it. I mean, in the end, they ended up being more mashed together because I hadn't included the mask. So that kind of got translated from one into the other as well. But yeah, it's great because it challenges. I think, like with you're talking about the having to learn new talents, a huge amount of I don't know how to draw this. I think the proviso for every artist is always the word yet at the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't know how to do this yet. Because as soon as you know you can't do something or you've been avoiding something, it becomes an itch that you've eventually just are going to have to scratch. And with Midst, there's so many itches to scratch in creating.
You're telling us.
Because like a big thing that I had with like the first cover is the landscape could be just rendered so blasted and orange and that's it. Because that's very much the way that the almost kind of Western style feel is often portrayed. But when you look at like the art that portrays it, it's usually so bursting full of life. So it's why there's so much color to contrast against that orange in the cover. So much cacti, succulent kind of energy. And of course, like the bright cats, just because I really enjoyed drawing those critters.
We got to talk about those cats for a second. The blue cat, I think, first appeared in, well, I forget the episode number, but it was Garage Sale was the title of the episode.
Oh, one of the animated illustrated episodes of Original Mids podcast?
Yes, it's the illustration that Will did of like the interior of Joe's garage, and you're kind of inside the garage and Lark is working on her bike and you can see the city bright outside, and you added in this blue cat with antlers snoozing on a pile of garage junk, and the cats returned for the cover of Address Unknown, and those are just one of those wonderful, I don't even want to call it a happy accident because there's nothing that feels accidental about it to me at all, but it's something that wasn't in our heads, the creators' heads at all. And there are beautiful things that can happen if you release control of your work just enough to let other people create in it. And you've populated the biodiverse ecosystem of Mids, and we thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for the blue cats, Will.
Yeah, did anything inspire those?
And their buttholes.
Of course, we have to mention.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
No matter how fantastical the world, the cats are going to be showing their buttholes. You know,
they absolutely
it's a universal
will.
constant.
Yes.
Can I just say about that piece of art? I pored over that illustration so much when I was thinking about the tractor, and I was thinking about Naomi's bike, and when I was designing Bonnie's Bocular
Bocular repair shop. Yes.
Very much just had the illustration all like my whole screen was this, and I was just zooming in to try to piece together and draw inspiration from the things that you did there, and try to see how, like, okay, so this already exists in the world of Midst. What can I get from this, and how can I incorporate it into another comic in this world? So thank you for that.
And I did a quick fact check. That is season 1, episode 16, if you want to go to YouTube and check that piece out.
To enjoy some more blue cat?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we cannot thank you, all of you, enough. We're just some kids who made a podcast which was just a hobby. And to now be working with incredible artists, writers such as yourselves, who are bringing richness and depth and newness and freshness and incredible talent and skill and imagination and style to this wild-ass cosmos that we casually improvised, is a gift to us that we cannot even articulate our level of thanks for.
Truly. It is like watching an alchemist change stone into something completely not stone. Like, it is magical what you do. And thank you for the opportunity to not only get to collaborate with you on all of these particular comics, but for bringing your flavor and your art, your experience and your perspective, your tools, your skills, and to share and enrich the midst cosmos. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, Zen and Matt said it all. I'll just add that I feel like I could keep talking to you for several more hours. It's artists and writers are always like in their houses creating, and it's so rare and fun when you have a gathering like this, or like at a con or something, where you can actually talk to other artists and like, how do you even this is hard, right? How do you do it?
It's so nice to have we keep talking about collaboration, but it is really beautiful to be reminded that like other people's brains exist and other people's life experience exists. And the beautiful thing about getting to be on a project with so many other artists and writers and creators is you get to mash it all together in one big sandbox and see what comes of it. And it's really inspiring, and it's really exciting to be a part of it.
Feels like a big supportive hug.
Yeah, and can I say thank you to you three? Like working with you has been really, really great. Like I feel like every question that I had, everything I wasn't sure about, what did you mean by that, or what can I possibly design or imagine? When I like bounced the question off to you, I always got like amazing feedback and very precise directions, and that's special and unique. Like not every client or art director or person who invents a world and lets other people play with it has the same kind of does that as well as you guys
Wow.
of explaining what you want to see and what what your idea of it is, but please have this thing and do whatever you think is right with it. And it was really special and made it a really fun project to work on.
Thank you very much. It's a treat for us to be taken on a midst adventure.
Yes.
I mean, it's our job to create the adventure for others, but this was our first time being brought on midst adventures that we did not solely create. So
Yeah,
all
it's like
of you
when
together,
the dungeon master gets to
so
be
all
the
of
player.
all of you brought us on new midst adventures coming forth from your imaginations and creativity. It's such a special treat and such a pleasure to chat with all of you today. So in conclusion, I'd like to ask each of you in turn. We'll start with you, Aviv. If our listeners would like to enjoy or discover some more of your work, what other projects, past or present, are you excited about, and what would you like to point our listeners to?
Where can they follow you? How can they throw money at you? Now's the time to plug yourself.
So I currently exist on social media on Blue Sky, period.
Yup.
And I briefly mentioned Crystal Heart at the beginning of the episode. It's the webcomic that I've been working on for the past 7 years with my creative partner, Eran Aviram. We finished it last year, which is
Congratulations.
wild.
Congrats.
That's
Thank you.
huge.
And you are very welcome to read all slightly over 300 pages of it, I think. And there might be some exciting publication-related news about that soon, which is exciting. And the other thing that's coming out from Dark Horse, I'm illustrating a Ghostbusters series.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Which is wild
Awesome.
for a person who doesn't draw cities or vehicles.
But hopefully draws ghosts.
Yes, the ghosts were great. It's written by David M. Boer, which wrote an amazing script. The colorist is Chris Peter, letterer Jimmy Betancourt. And there's also I've already got to see like a really cool cover for the first issue by Tyler Crook, which shows pirates taking over New York, which is what you want to see.
Excellent.
It's coming out this May, the first issue, and I'm really excited about that.
Incredible.
awesome.
Thank you very much, Aviv. Kendra?
Yes, I have a number of books out. My solo sort of brainchild project is called Real Hero Shit. It's an upper teens adult medieval fantasy adventure story. The second volume is being kickstarted this summer, which is really exciting, through Iron Circus Comics. I also did a younger grade comic called Tell No Tales, Pirates of the Southern Seas, with my friend Sam Maggs, who was the writer on it. And that is also sequel coming, TBD. You can find me at Kendra W. Can Draw. Everywhere. Reluctantly still existing on Twitter, but not really posting. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram. I'm also on Patreon if you would like to support me there. That's a huge part of my existence. And yeah, I think it's I'm happy to see you there.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Excellent.
much, Kendra. And Will.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm under that terminal disease of NDA that artists tend to have to swim under. So I mentioned it before, but Eat the Reich was my most recent book, which is just doing great. And we won 3 Ennies last year at Gen Con,
Yes.
which was like a huge deal to me. I
Yeah.
got overexcited and made a fool of myself receiving awards.
Do you have like a plaque or like a physical thing you can put on your shelf?
Medals.
Medals, great.
Medals. We got medals, which then people, being terminally British and afraid to kind of show off, people had to force me to kind of wear them as we celebrated.
How humiliating.
Yeah. But yeah, beyond that, you can find me online. I'm at Charmonkey. Or if you search Will Kirkby, you'll generally find links to pretty much everything that I'm online for. But yeah, beyond that, there are very, very exciting things I'm doing. I'm just unfortunately not allowed to talk about them.
Well, people will simply have to find you online and watch for exciting announcements, I suppose.
Yeah.
Incredible. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to Aviv Or, Will Kirkby, and Kendra Wells for being on the air with us today live, and to our other not live contributors who've been part of this episode, as well as a huge thank you to all the teams at Dark Horse and Critical Role who participated in making all of these incredible comics possible. To take us out, if you would like to enjoy these incredible Mids comics made by our very talented friends today, ask for Mids at your local comic book shop or head over to darkhorse.com to pick up copies of these comics.
Keep an eye out for the hardcover collection, which is coming out on August the 12th. Midst Tales from the Cosmos is available for pre-order at those locations Zen mentioned.
And season 2 of Unend is forthcoming, so stay tuned for more announcements about that. In the meantime, if you'd like to hear more episodes of Mids Messages and get early ad-free access to episodes of Unend, you can become a subscriber at mids.co or beacon.tv.
Thanks, friends. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.